It's 2 a.m., and you're replaying a conversation from 3 days ago, hunting for the exact second you said the wrong thing. Because the sharper your mind, the harder happiness gets. Everyone else fell asleep an hour ago. Yours is still running audits. That's not a personality flaw. It's a 200,000-year-old feature working exactly as designed. In 1921, a Stanford psychologist began tracking 1,528 of the smartest children in America to settle this exact question. Hold on to those files. They come back at the end. Start with the story everyone already believes, the tortured genius, the drinking writer, the brilliant friend who can't hold it together. The idea that a sharp mind ships with a broken switch is so old, it feels like a law of nature, and every generation finds new faces to pin it on. Poets get the legend, then rock stars, then startup founders, and the moral stays fixed. Brilliance is a debt, and misery is the interest. But is it true? Lewis Terman, that Stanford psychologist, was certain the whole thing was a myth, and he staked his career on proving it. He spent the rest of his life following those 1,528 children, everyone with an IQ of 135 or higher, through report cards and marriages and wars, into adulthood, into old age, into the grave. Researchers kept the project alive for 8 decades after it began, making it one of the longest-running studies in the history of psychology. And the files killed the legend. The gifted kids grew up healthier than average, better adjusted, taller even. They lived roughly 10 years longer than their peers. On paper, a powerful brain looked less like a curse and more like a head start. Which leaves a harder question. If intelligence doesn't break people, why are you the one still awake? The first answer lies in what a strong brain does when nothing is happening. In 2015, psychologist Alexander Penny and his team at Lakehead University in Canada tested 126 adults, measuring their intelligence alongside their tendency to worry. The result was blunt. The higher a person's verbal intelligence, meaning skill with words and abstract ideas, the more they worried, and the more they ruminated. Rumination is the technical term for chewing on the past, replaying old scenes and scanning them for mistakes. Penny's explanation cuts deep. A verbally gifted mind simulates past and future in high definition. It doesn't just remember Tuesday's awkward comment. It rebuilds the room, the lighting, the faces, the 3 better sentences that existed and went unsaid. The machinery that writes essays and wins arguments spends its nights producing disaster previews. So where's the off switch? There isn't one. The simulator runs whether or not you hand it a real problem, and a bored simulator will happily invent work. Penny's data held one more clue. Nonverbal intelligence, the kind measured with patterns and puzzles instead of words, pointed the opposite way. People who scored higher on it spent less time mentally reliving recent social events. The likely reason is speed. A fast processor finishes the analysis in the moment, files the event, and moves on. A powerful verbal engine keeps the case open for days, cross-examining witnesses who have long since forgotten the trial. Same evening, 2 minds, and only one of them is still in that room after everyone else went home. Now zoom out 200,000 years because the second cost is older than language. Your brain was tuned for life in small wandering bands, a world of maybe 150 familiar faces where the sun set on the same routines it rose on. Evolutionary psychologists Satoshi Kanazawa and Norman Lee call this the savanna theory of happiness. What satisfies you today still tracks what kept your ancestors alive back then. What happens when that ancient software runs a modern life? In 2016, the pair tested it on survey data from more than 15,000 young adults. Most of the results followed the ancestral script. Dense, crowded places made people less satisfied with their lives, which fits the mismatch, since your ancestors could go a long time without meeting a face they didn't know, and a subway platform undoes that math in about a minute. Frequent time with friends made people more satisfied, exactly as tribal wiring would predict, except in one group. Among the most intelligent people in the sample, the friendship effect reversed, and more socializing tracked with lower life satisfaction. One reading of that strange result. The minds best equipped for evolutionary novelty pour themselves into long, solitary modern projects no hunter-gatherer would recognize, until company starts to feel like interruption. The finding is genuinely debated among scientists. But you've met the pattern. The sharpest person you know is usually the hardest one to see. So is the wiring itself the disease? Is a high IQ just a bigger engine bolted onto the same ancient brakes? If amplifiers overload, somewhere there should be a population wearing the damn. In 2018, Researcher Ruth Karpinski went looking for one. She surveyed 3,715 members of Mensa, the high IQ society, for a study in the journal Intelligence, and her numbers read like a verdict. Roughly 27% reported a diagnosed mood disorder. About 20% reported an anxiety disorder. Both figures sit near double the U.S. national rates. Karpinski called it the hyperbrain, hyperbody theory, a nervous system that reacts to everything intensely, all the time, until even a shirt tag can register as a threat. Then came the pushback, and the pushback matters. People who join a high IQ club are a self-selected slice, hardly a fair cross-section of intelligent minds, and large population studies find that higher intelligence protects mental health at least as often as it harms it. Hold both findings at once and a sharper picture appears. Intelligence works like an amplifier. Whatever signal runs through it, curiosity or dread, comes out louder, more detailed and harder to ignore. And an amplifier has one more trick. A mind that simulates well is never limited to the past. It also renders every life you could be living instead. The career not chosen, the city not moved to, the version of tonight where the conversation went right. Psychologists call this counterfactual thinking, the imagining of alternatives to what actually happened. The more alternatives a mind can generate, the more competition its real life faces, and the harder ordinary contentment has to fight to be noticed. A dim engine sees one road. A bright one sees the entire map, including every turn already missed. That is why praise can bounce off an intelligent mind while one small failure sticks for a decade. The praise matches only one imagined life. The failure contradicts hundreds, which brings everything back to those files from 1921. Terman's geniuses were, on average, fine. Yet inside 8 decades of records sits the detail that actually matters. When researchers compared the participants who flourished with the ones who drifted, what separated them? Not the test scores. Ratings of confidence and perseverance did the separating qualities about how the engine was driven, rather than how big it was. Meanwhile, two boys Terman rejected for scoring too low. William Shockley and Luis Alvarez went on to win Nobel Prizes, while none of his 1,528 certified geniuses ever did. Raw wattage was never the story. And that detail travels well across a century. The engine size never decided which of Terman's kids ended up at peace. The hands on the wheel did, and an engine with a destination burns its fuel on the road ahead, while one left unassigned burns it on the road behind. So tonight, when the audit starts again, watch what it's actually doing. A world-class simulation engine with no assignment has picked a 3-day-old conversation as its project. The 2 a.m. replay. The dread hanging over an unopened email, the 10th read of a 2-word text. High-definition thinking aimed at problems that can't be solved, only survived. Notice that nothing on that target list is a lion or a winter. The engine defaults to social threats now because, in a band of 150, losing the group's goodwill genuinely was a survival problem, and your body still bills embarrassment at ancestral rates. So what was all that horsepower for? Your ancestors pointed the same engine at winter at the next ridge, and it carried them across a planet. It hasn't weakened since, it's just idling. The sharper your mind, the harder happiness gets, that much is real, and now you know the price list. A simulator with no off switch, a social world it was never tuned for, every feeling arriving pre-amplified. But the files that opened in 1921 close on a quieter truth. The smartest children in America were never sentenced to sadness. They were handed louder engines than everybody else. The unhappy ones let the engine pick the road. The rest chose it themselves and slept.